God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello, and you're listening to NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFL Extended Strategic Principles, found on the web at NFL-ESP.com. Again, I am your host, Mark Anthony DeBello, and for more information on me and this program, you may go to my website, markanthonydebello.com, and then click on the Sports tab. Today is December the 19th, the Saturday night game, edition of football just wrapped, and the Jets, as we prognosticated, although you weren't able to hear it, had the Jets in most of our contest plays. And then we also had St. Louis in most of our contest plays, and that game was on Thursday night as they defeated Tampa. So we're in Week 15 of the NFL regular season. This is going to be, again, a half-an-hour program. We're going to cover things from the three basic areas of pro football, and that is covering the games from the perspective of the NFL ESP data system product and consultation service. Secondly, for those who have an interest in things going on in Nevada in relation to investing on games and using our exclusive formula for developing a number we call the power spread, which is different from another spread that's disseminated and distributed throughout Nevada. And then lastly, for those who want to use our information for those who play fantasy football. So again, as you've heard me state before, NFL ESP basically focuses on four aspects, and that's the spiritual, the motivational, X and O's, typically play design, and then strategic, which incorporates our exclusive use again of our power rankings, and then the differential, which equals the power spread. And then we have other factors, basically broken down into five: home field advantage, basic strategy decisions by the coach and the opposing coach, turnovers, total yards, and I'm forgetting one. home field advantage, yardage, and the score, obviously, yardage of the score, turnovers, and QB time, or quarterback production, specifically on third down, and how that equates to quarterback time, and whether the quarterback rushes or has line protection and remains in the pocket, or he moves laterally to his left or right. So those are the major areas which equate to production in the standard or typical NFL game, which is basically 45 points. One team wins 24-21 and gets 350 yards total offense, and the other team gets 300 yards. So again, our purpose is to improve your production, and we do that by helping a head coach make the most probable and most productive basic strategy decisions based on the percentages, not necessarily from a Moneyball analytical point of view, which is the system, quote unquote, going around now, and that has a lot to do with the draft and player performance. But we're talking more pre-game, in-game, and post-game strategy, and again, which has been proven to increase the team's win production by 10 to 15% in the NFL, at least at a minimum, and then more so in the other pro leagues, and even more so in NCAA basketball and football. Again, we cover the games from basically the P's we like to use, the prophetic, the predictive, and the productive. It's all about being more powerful, a more powerful and productive team. By example, quickly, one coach can gain 300 yards and only get 9 points out of it, or 0 points, and another coach can get 300 yards and score 24 points. So it just matters on, many factors, as I already mentioned. And then the in-game total or tally of the, power spread and what that information entails. So having said that, and now that we have had an introduction, let's go over last week's games and run down the thoughts we had and shared, and then how it equates to what's going to happen for the rest of the season, which we've been pretty accurate from the beginning, and then this week's games, and then again covering them from the three basic areas or phases, if you will, of NFL ESP, Nevada, and then fantasy. So last week Minnesota played Arizona in a close game. We like both those teams. Believe they can both be the NFC representatives. Definitely Arizona's our Super Bowl pick, and Minnesota can, if they can get by Green Bay, will be in the NFC Championship. So they played a close game as we had projected. Seattle walloped Baltimore. I was blessed and honored to have some communication with Baltimore. I think you're going to see them start either resting players or experimenting, doing some different things, and I don't think they're going to keep any of the remaining games close. And this season has been a wash, and it's not so unexpected because last year they were actually power ranked equal to New England, if not a little bit greater, and would have won that game. They actually outperformed, if in a sense, New England, except for their turnovers, or that game was relatively even. And then all three of those teams, including Seattle, were basically all power ranked relatively equally, and that's how we projected it from the beginning of the year. Atlanta played Carolina. I actually thought Atlanta might keep this game close. Again, as I said, Carolina is overrated. As we projected at the beginning of the year, the NFC East is the worst division, and then Carolina's division, the NFC South. So when Carolina, I'm not sure I'm going to explain this quite mathematically correct, but when you have in this division, 7 really poor teams, which is everybody in the NFC East and South, one team is going to sort of suck up, if you will, or catch the draft, to use a NASCAR term, or usurp the wins. And that looks shiny and great, having a 14-0 record, I guess, that Carolina has now. But again, they're an overrated team. They're just competing. Again, they got 8 easy wins or more against the common opponents in their division. Some of them twice. I'm not looking at their schedule week to week, but we all know that they have a perfect season in place, and I know there's been some talk on what's going to happen in the final weeks because they're definitely better than the Giants this week and then the team that they're facing next week. I'm not sure of the last week. I think you could see a divisional upset by a team who, quote unquote, a losing team who plays their Super Bowl. Again, Carolina is overrated. Now, the note I was going to make about going for a perfect season, you always, with rare, I can't even think of an exception off the top of my head. You want to go for the perfect season. You don't want to rest players. I heard somebody, say it eloquently on ESPN, who never, they rarely say something accurate or truly prophetic or, godly. But having said that, and it escapes my thought processes who the person was, but they're right. You should always go for a perfect season. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But I'm fearful. I never was I respect him, obviously, Coach Rivera, but I sense he might just rest players. I think they call him Riverboat Rom, but he's not really that big and aggressive, strategist, to be honest with you. He definitely doesn't really know NFL ESP or what the power spread is going into their games. But anyway, so having said that, here in Nevada, they actually have Carolina actually very much favored to not have a perfect season. So unless they lose, and I don't think they're going to lose to the Giants this week unless it's just some egregious, crazy turnovers, bad weather, and just really bad home calls, because the Giants do get home calls. Eli Manning is, somewhat pouts like his brother, and, they get a lot of calls. As I noted at the beginning of the season, it's really up to Beckham and Ryan Nassib, the success of the Giants season, and Odell Beckham, the wide receiver, surely holding up his end of the bargain. Now Eli is still, very much a gunslinger, and you don't know, how he's going to play or throw week to week. But if they had somebody in there with more consistency, I think you'd see the Giants doing better. But again, they're all weak teams in that division, and I wouldn't be surprised if our second place team after Tony Romo went down with the Cowboys, Washington, wins that division. So speaking of them, last week they played Chicago. This a missed field goal at the end of the game. I actually thought Chicago should win this game. They did not, so I just admit I was wrong there. Pittsburgh, not surprisingly, beat Cincinnati. Cincinnati, again, is a bit overrated. You have a pretty good defense, but once Andy Dalton has gone down, now they got A.J. McCarron, and I'm not a real big A.J. McCarron fan, and I think you might see, and I'll get into this week, since he go down again to San Francisco. So, wheeling forward, speaking of San Francisco, they were defeated by Cleveland. Glad to see Johnny Manziel back in the lineup for Cleveland, where I think he should have been all career long. Not to berate him, I'm a huge fan, as you've heard me say here, but you have to keep somebody who gets distracted and who's, gets tempted or has alcohol issues like I'm recovering. I don't use the term recovering alcoholic. I've been clean and sober, thank God, for over 20 years, but I know it's very easy to relapse, and when he was caught out in the nightclub, the one thing that I would have told Cleveland is the basic thing that you do, the tenet of being an alcoholic, is lying. And if you lie about being in a club, it typically means you were drinking. So lying is just, it's just a real linchpin part of being an alcoholic. So anyway, hope he's back to his, continuing sobriety, or never fell off the wagon, I guess is the term. Again, I think, you're going to see Cleveland, and I'll get into this week, perform surprisingly well against Seattle. So the next game up was Indy-Jacksonville. I'm totally shocked, to be honest, that Jacksonville thumped Indy the way they did. I'm not sure what's going on with Indy this year, other than they need Andrew Luck in the lineup. Obviously, he's a 9-point player. You heard me give rankings on the quarterbacks before. Your typical NFL quarterback is anywhere from 1 to 9 points. Some are minus points, actually, like Geno Smith of the Jets. And now that he's been, was benched with that injury, broken jaw at the beginning of the sideline, you see how well the Jets are doing with just an average, if you will. No disrespect again to Ryan Fitzpatrick, but just a huge disparity. But again, coming into this week, and I'll get to this week again, New England is going to be playing the Jets after this week in Week 16, as I projected to the Jets brass. God bless them. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with them. The Jets are going to fall a game short of the wild card. I think you're going to see KC and Pittsburgh be the wild card teams, and the Jets are going to wish they beat New England one of these games, which they'll keep both of them. I'm not sure what the first score was, but I know NFL ESP would have helped them win one of those two games against New England, and those were basically the two linchpin games that they needed, the landmark games they needed to win to have a wild card chance, because they were really underrated last year. They had a lot of turmoil in the office. I know there was a lot of stuff going on that you didn't hear about in the media, who's never accurate, between Rex Ryan and Geno Smith. But again, that was, a blessing in disguise that the poor kid got slugged. And then, it's not a surprise to me that Rex Ryan picked up the player. So there was a lot of gamesmanship going on there, and I think people were taking, little shots at one another, if you will. So anyway, having said that, last week the Jets thumped Tennessee, and I, not surprised by that. Marcus Mariota, I hope is only going to get better. I still projected him to be Rookie of the Year. I have to stick to that. I'm not sure who is competing against him right now. I'm a little weary. It's been a long week for me already. And then the Jets went to Dallas and just beat the Cowboys. So the Jets have a really good record. The people here in Nevada weren't surprised by it. They've been making, Coach Bowles is doing a good job. They don't still comprehend NFL ESP, which is going to cost them, but again, I give them great credit. Staying in the AFC, Kansas City defeated San Diego in a game we thought would be relatively low scoring and close, and it was a very low scoring. KC winning 10-3. They're definitely one of our wild card teams we picked from the beginning of the year. I was looking at KC in Buffalo or KC in Pittsburgh, and I think that's, again, what you're going to end up seeing. Buffalo played Philadelphia. I'm shocked that Philadelphia ended up defeating Buffalo. Now there's talk of Sam Bradford coming back to Philly. Again, I'll be shocked if Philly gets past. I think Arizona will thump Philly this weekend, to be honest with you. I think they'll wallop them, and Philly will still end up with 5 or 6 wins. Well, we projected 5 at the end of the year, so I'm not sure they got the rest of the way, but I know it's a pretty tough schedule, I recall. So again, I'm shocked that they beat Buffalo, but that goes to show to how Buffalo is. I actually myself even overrated them this year. St. Louis beat Detroit. Figured that game could go either way with those two mercurial teams up and down. You don't quite know, especially with St. Louis in the quarterback situation. I liked Case Keenum. I remember him playing some games last year. I was impressed by him, and he actually did pretty well against Tampa. So I'm not surprised by that. We liked him. You heard me mention him when his first game he got in the lineup for St. Louis. Detroit, again, this is a team that, is power ranked much higher than they're performing, their one-loss record. So to me, that's indicative of something in-house, organizationally, not necessarily, and that was obvious. They had all the turmoil and transition in the front office, but that team is woefully underperforming based on their power rating, especially from last year. In another game from last week, New Orleans defeated Tampa. We projected that. It was a quote-unquote upset, and you wonder why when people hear upset, where that terminology comes from. That terminology basically isn't really based on one-loss record, although sometimes the media, deems it that way and relates to it that way, but it's basically the Vegas number. And again, as you've heard me say repeatedly, the Vegas number is not the accurate number. We have the actual power spread number that is the most accurate number, and then Vegas goes ahead and alters that and skews it, and then how people, invest in their teams, or the more popular teams, or whoever the media is, picking, and they're, again, usually incorrect, then that number will move. So, but we had New Orleans actually, power rated either equal or to Tampa, and they ended up defeating them. We liked Oakland as a mild upset against Denver. I still like Osweiler in the lineup against Peyton Manning, and believe if Denver, and again, I heard the media say if Denver's to go far, they need to go with Peyton Manning. I believe, otherwise. And again, you can just go back to the tape of NFL, Moneyball here and listen, and I think you'll see that from week to week and as cumulatively across the whole season, the spectrum of the whole season, that you won't hear a more accurate. If you want to call myself a media member, you can actually go to my website, markanthonydebello.com, and see I have a bunch of media passes there. But again, in this world system we live in, it's upside down. These are biblical terms. Yes, I believe in God. If you don't know God, you don't know anything. If you know God, you can know everything, and He certainly knows football. The world system, it's upside down. The guys who make the most money broadcasting give their just opinions. They don't give truth. They're not very accurate, and they don't quite have the, blessing to have the godly intelligence or knowledge that I'm blessed to have, and here I am. I can hardly get people to listen to a YouTube podcast here, so it makes no sense to me. Also from last week, Green Bay crushed Dallas. We're not surprised by that. We liked them a lot, and they went through the number, the power spread. Again, I'm going to be against the NFC East, and probably again on against all three NFC East, or all four this weekend. And I'll get to this weekend coming up here in a few seconds. New England thumped Houston, not surprised by that. And we actually like Miami over the Giants. It was sort of a toss-up game, but I actually thought Miami would do well at home, but this is just a real poor Miami team. So, and a little bit shocked there, so I have to admit my inaccuracy with that. So we got 10 minutes left in the program. Let's get to NFL Week 15. We already discussed the games where St. Louis had defeated Tampa and the Jets had defeated the Cowboys. So Minnesota's home. Again, I think Minnesota's a playoff team. I can't see the Bears defeating them. It would have to take for the Bears, who were basically 5-point power spread underdogs. Minnesota would have to not get home calls in that college stadium, which is not very conducive to home field advantage, especially with the noise and the bias that the Vikings would need. So, the next thing you want to look at, if you expect, Minnesota probably outgain the Bears by 75 or maybe up to 100 yards, and probably a little bit less. But we'll stick with about 75 yards. You're going to need turnovers. Bridgewater, I'm not a big fan of. He doesn't really produce. He either throws an incompletion or he's more of a, a game management type. But if he throws, he's just they're not really a passing team, obviously. Their defense and their running game, and that's fine. That's working for them, so you can't dispute that. But if they ever just got a really, productive quarterback points-wise, they do much better. Atlanta's playing Jacksonville. As we projected, Atlanta has just lost a bunch of games in a row. Now they're playing Jacksonville. I'm looking for an upset here. I'm not sure why, only because can a team really lose 8, 9, 10 games in a row? Atlanta, we said they could. But again, Jacksonville's overrated even though they're winning some games. Indy's playing Houston. This is basically for the division. I have to believe that Indy has, I'll use, back class, a term from horse racing, that they were the, division champs last year. They were a very powerful team last year. But again, once everybody started projecting them to win the Super Bowl, you could have, you can throw them out. But I think Indy's the type of team when luck comes back that could surprise in the playoffs and show their back class and their power. The Chiefs are playing the Ravens. Already discussed the Ravens, how I think they're going to do with regards to just, perhaps, you never want to use the Q word in pro football, and you can figure out what that is. But, you just get distracted. You just weaken. You break. I mean, the offense break, the defense broke, the offense broke, and then you get a real, I'll call it just the Q factor. But Kansas City's still playing for a wild card, so I think you're going to see, KC, who's definitely a higher power ranked team, play well. So if you're the Ravens, you might as well just pull out all the stops and just experiment every possible thing you could ever experiment with. You might just end up winning. The Bills are playing the Redskins. I'm all in on. I'm not all in, but I know the Bills are a better team. Washington at home will get some calls in Washington in a division race. I know from a Nevada perspective, a lot of people are investing in Buffalo, so that should make you weary. You might want to go with Washington, but these are not, neither of these teams are very good teams. Tennessee's playing New England. I think Tennessee is going to keep the game close within the power spread. There's some question mark on Brady's health, but New England is beginning to weaken now. They're beginning to falter on offense, of all things. Injuries and things to that effect, and when that offense starts to break, the defense will as well. But again, New England will not repeat the Super Bowl. It's just too difficult, and we projected that from the beginning of the year. People are now back on Philly because they won 2 in a row. Arizona, on any given Sunday, or I shouldn't even say that expression, every given Sunday, can defeat Philly by 3 touchdowns. And I think, barring some miracle, and again, Philly does get 7 points at home for home field advantageous calls. Chip Kelly is the type to go for 2-point conversions, which he should be doing on every play. He should be going for an onside kick, just trying to manufacture points in where we like to make aggressive basic strategy decisions, because they're not a better team than Arizona, and they wouldn't win on 19 out of 20 tries. Same with Carolina and the Giants, and I respect Coach Coughlin a lot. Already mentioned Carolina. Somebody's that they don't falter or forfeit on their own, let's say the last week. But again, this power spread keeps going up and up and up and up, and the surplus is building. But again, Carolina is an overrated team, and they're not going to get to the NFC, be the NFC rep in the Super Bowl. As much as I love Cam Newton and respect and think they're playing great defense, and they have a great defense. But it'd be nice to see Kelvin Benjamin in the lineup for him still, though. He was out from the beginning of the year. Cleveland, Seattle, this might be a big upset right here for, Seattle is playing fantastically, is normally the better team than Cleveland, but I think Johnny Football is going to try to equal Russell Wilson. I think you're going to see the game of his life in that game, just to be honest. I just have a feeling. Green Bay, Oakland, this is another game where, from a Nevada perspective, everybody's investing in Green Bay. Green Bay is normally the better team. They do have some injuries on defense. But again, this game could, be a relatively pretty close game, although I would lean toward Green Bay. But this is one, and I know Coach Del Rio doesn't really follow NFL ESP, and Coach McCarthy of Green Bay makes more, productive, probable and percentage-wise decisions. So I think you might see that in the Green Bay game. Maybe Oakland kicks a field goal or something when they shouldn't. Miami, San Diego, this is a real key game from a Nevada perspective for San Diego. These are two bad teams from a fantasy perspective. I'll just share openly with you. I like this game a lot for scoring points, as I do the Atlanta game. San Diego scored 7 points or less their previous two games. That's a real key factor if you're looking to be really productive in your third game. Miami, I think, San Diego's just going to throw the ball up and down the field. So if you're Miami, if you can't keep up with them and you're not getting turnovers, you better make some aggressive strategy decisions. The best game on the board is obviously, I think, Denver and Pittsburgh. I wouldn't be surprised if Denver wins this game. I think they're, in the end, will be the better team. Pittsburgh might need the game a little bit more, and Pittsburgh definitely gets a lot of home field calls. Up to 7 points for sure. I've seen it countless times. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh wins that one. But again, that's a real key game for an upset. Another key upset game, and again, I already mentioned A.J. McCarron. I respect anybody who makes it to the pros. Believe me, I should have been a pro quarterback instead of being shoved into a wide receiver. I mean, I could throw the ball 50 yards in 8th grade and hit a cone. A lot. But because somebody in my family wanted to be quarterback and had a little pride issue and, was always second trying to be number one, and I wasn't respected by my father, I got shuffled back and made to be a wide receiver, which is fine because I could still, was blessed to catch everything thrown to me, but I could also throw it and run it, and I should have just been the quarterback. But anyway, having said that I went off on a tangent. I'm sorry, just some bad feelings about something that happened this week. But nonetheless, I think San Fran can actually, although I'm not a big Blaine Gabbert fan, he is apparently doing okay for them, and I think you're going to see an upset here. This power spread is just too many points for San Francisco with A.J. Dalton out, and I'm not against A.J. Dalton. I like A.J. Dalton. Some people don't, but he's a pretty darn good quarterback. And then the last game on the slate is the Detroit-New Orleans game. I rated this game as a toss-up. These are just, again, two weak teams. Coach Caldwell, I do give him a lot of credit. He does make a lot of fourth and one calls. But in a game like this, it's projected to be high scoring. You really got to keep track of the in-game power spread. Now, I'll say this on a fantasy note. When a lot of people, a game is, Pete Axthelm was an old broadcaster used to call something a moto game, which is an acronym for Master of the Obvious. But this is one of those Master of the Obvious moto games whereby, you expect there's going to be a lot of points. So, maybe there will be, or just, under whatever their projected total of about 50 points is. But from a fantasy perspective, I wouldn't really necessarily have my players in this game. But if, again, from a basic strategy decision perspective, you really need to have an in-game strategist or a GMC, game management coordinator, tracking the total yards, the turnovers, and what, productive or unproductive basic strategy decisions the coaches are making, because Coach Payton and Coach Caldwell have been known to make aggressive ones. So anyway, having said that, that wraps it up for this week. I hope it's been insightful. I thank you for those who do listen. God bless you. Please spread the word. And you have been listening to NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFL ESP, found on the web at NFL-ESP.com. I've been your host, Mark Anthony DeBello. For more information on me and this program, please go to markanthony.com and click on the Sports tab. Thank you again, and God bless you.